if
Can I swear?
Yeah, of course. But so I guess we can start with something easy, like introducing yourselves and your like what you do in life. He was
You go first.
Nah, you can go first.
No, you go
first.
Go for it, Ben.
Well, my name's Ben. Online, I go by Sparkey. For the last 7 years or so, I've been working in the iOS field. These days, I do vulnerability research. Previously, I've been publicly known for my jailbreaking work. So yeah, that's kind of consumed me for the last few years. And then outside of my day job, I'm a rock climber. I DJ a bit. I like to fly drones. Yeah, into music, cars, heavily.
Do you own any cars?
Oh, way too many.
You own cars?
Yeah.
Where do you store them?
I rent a separate garage away from my apartment because I have so many cars.
Wait, can we focus on that just for 2 seconds? How many cars do you own?
Technically 5.
Do you drive any outside?
Do I drive them?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, that's what they're for.
Well, because you live in Bristol, I don't know. I mean, in Brussels, public transport is so easy to get around with.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy driving. The roads in the southwest are generally pretty good. I go up to Wales a lot, which is some of the best roads I've ever driven on, especially at least in the UK. I'm also part of a car club, so I do a lot of car events, track days, charity drives, that kind of thing. And yeah, I drive a lot.
So what kind of cars do you have?
I'm into my Italian cars, so I have some Alfa Romeos, which is maybe not everyone's heard of, but they're kind of a small Italian car brand.
Are you more into race cars, or
not strictly,
cars?
but yeah, sports cars that I can take to the track.
Oh, do you actually do that too?
Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
I can't wait to visit you.
Yeah, it's really good fun, but it's a really expensive hobby.
Yeah,
Really expensive hobby. Owning them, maintaining them, the depreciation, the servicing, the warranties, the tires, and then renting somewhere to keep them, the insurance, the MOTs, and the road tax, and then if you want to go to the track, that's expensive. You might need track insurance. You might need some new brakes on your car by the end of the day. So it gets really expensive really quickly, but it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of the number one thing I enjoy outside of work.
Okay.
It's my biggest hobby.
Okay, cool. So besides cars and rock climbing and drone filming, what would you like doing on just a chill day?
A chill day. It's actually $1 million question because I also struggle to answer this. I find that my hobbies are quite substantial. I'm also into mountain biking, for example. So if I want to go mountain biking, it's a whole day, right? I need to go and book a bike and pass at the bike place and drive up and so on and so forth. So I actually struggle to find things to do when I've just got a bit of time to kill. Maybe a Sunday afternoon, no one's around. Yeah. I'm not really sure what to do with myself. I'll generally end up watching Instagram Reels, watching YouTube, maybe getting a takeaway.
Do you scroll a lot on Instagram? I find that very common with people in the field. Oh, really?
It's so addictive, yeah.
Okay, so you're on social media then? You spend quite a lot of time on...
Yeah, Reddit, Instagram. I still go on Twitter, even though no one uses it anymore, which is really sad. I feel like the whole infosec industry has been fragmented, because after Elon bought Twitter and it kind of went to shit, a lot of people left and moved to Mastodon.
Yeah.
Some people went to Blue Sky. So now we used to have quite a thriving infosec community on Twitter, and now a lot of people have moved away from it, and it's kind of a mess.
Is it dispersed in a lot of other social media platforms?
Yeah, I think mainly I think most people move to Mastodon, but I personally just can't wrap my head around it. It's
it seems quite similar to Twitter, though.
It's similar in principle, but even just the UI I struggle with,
okay.
And the way it functions, where people can reply to each other, but it won't necessarily show that the message they've posted is a reply to another post. I don't know. I've never really gelled with it, so I stick to Twitter, shit posting on Twitter, but I'm kind of the only one these days, it feels like.
You still post any like blog post or work that you've been working on?
I haven't in a long time. There was one blog post that I did with work that we published on our company site, but I haven't done anything else. The one exception is me and Seguza have been working on a talk for a project we worked on 5 years ago. Well, we gave the talk, we filmed it, and we've been meaning to A, write a blog post, and B, upload the talk to YouTube and publish it publicly. So we need to get around to doing that.
Where did you present the talk?
It was at OX41Con in Thessaloniki, which was not this year, not last year, but the year before.
I thought that 41Con wasn't recorded generally.
No, so generally the policy is like no cameras, no photos, etc. But in our case, we wanted to film the talk.
Okay.
So we asked permission, and because it was just me and Seguza in frame,
yeah,
it was fine.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone like spoke throughout the talk, so it's just a recording of us.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, cool. So, John, what about you? What's your backstory and how many cars do you own?
Far less than Ben. I would say I'm an enjoyer of computers. Obviously, more recently, kind of on the security side, reverse engineering side, anything low level, really.
Okay.
So that stuff is all interesting to me. Outside of computers, also an enjoyer of music, playing guitar. I'm trying to think of like what Ben was talking about, like have hobbies and stuff. I mean, I think that aside from that, it's kind of what my time is spent doing, or just doing stuff with friends.
Do you, like both of you, do you guys have a lot of free time, like considering the work that you do?
I think it depends, like if you're in a busy season or where something is really kind of like requiring a lot of your attention, or there's some sort of urgency, then you might end up working more than 40 hours a week, of course. But I think that I think everybody realizes that the work is pretty mentally taxing on its own, even in just a regular working hours capacity. So I think people are generally pretty conscious of trying to have like a good work-life balance, and I think employers, or at least like good ones, are aware of that as well.
So you would say your employers are pretty good with work-life balance?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, there's been a couple of occasions where I've needed time off for like personal reasons, and it's always been like, yeah, no problem, take as much time as you need. Like, that's it.
That's nice.
No questions asked. So
I feel like that's very common in non-corporate environments.
Yeah.
That's kind of the field that you guys work in. I think it's like smallish companies, and you guys seem close to like the managers and CEOs as well. So easy to communicate that. Okay, cool. But so you didn't really talk about like how long you've been in the field and stuff like that.
I mean, I probably first started learning programming when I was, say, 9 or 10. Right. So like it's been quite some time since I've been doing that. Obviously not in the capacity of doing anything meaningful, right? You know, like you look up YouTube tutorials on Java and you're copying code into Eclipse or something that's back all the way then. So, like you're not doing anything meaningful, but you're kind of getting that part of your brain to slowly start developing.
Was this for video game purposes?
Well, yeah, like when I was younger, I was interested originally in making video games, but that kind of like, I think when I realized that I had to learn how to program, I just thought that programming was cool and kind of forgot about the video game. But like, yeah, and then I think later I kind of got into reverse engineering because as a teenager, I was always like pirating software from a bunch of shady sites. Like
Cut out.
Like music and other interests usually require pretty expensive software that, if you're 14 and have no income, like it isn't realistic for you to be able to buy. So I think at some point I got tired of, always trying to go wait for, the latest release of Photoshop or something else to get cracked by, some cracking group and then download it off
Pirate Bay.
Kick-Ass Torrents was incredible back before that site got shut down. Rest in peace. But I think at some point I was like, you know what? I want to learn how to do this myself. Like, I don't want to have to wait for these guys to do it. So I think that's what got me into reverse engineering, and then kind of just did that off and on for a number of years. And then I think by the time that I got to university, I kind of got more involved in that.
But so when was the first time that you actually opened a program in something like IDA or Ghidra or to reverse engineer software?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I don't really remember a lot of what I did last year. So I think that all the way back then, I don't know. I think I would say maybe around 15 or 16. It's hard to pinpoint exactly. And I think the other thing is obviously back then also I was awful at reverse engineering. I don't think I really started to get good at reverse engineering until maybe 19 or 20, I think. And I think that back then it was kind of just following along. I forget the name of the tutorials that everybody followed, that they were written to use Ollie debug, and they were some reversing tutorials and then some cracking tutorials, but really old, blogspot.com posts with, low resolution screenshots of everything, but just following along with that.
Because Seguza mentioned in the last interview I did with him that he would stare at the instructions and assembly until it made sense. Is that something that you had to do as well, or both of you? How did you learn? Because if I was to learn today, I have so many resources. There are so many hack the boxes and walkthroughs and stuff like that you can learn. How did you guys learn?
That's a heavy question. I don't remember exactly. I never sat down with the ARM64 manual and thought, I'm going to learn every instruction mnemonic in here. But I think honestly, it would have just been using IDA. The IDA disassembler, which gives you pseudocode, is a very C-like, output. And I think from there, you can start comparing what the disassembler has generated versus the pseudocode. And I think we're also kind of lucky in that ARM64 is a fairly friendly language. It's quite easy to read generally. Most of the instructions kind of do what you expect, or the most common ones you'd see. There's add and subtract and branch here and whatever else.
But ARM64 wasn't really on computers at the time. That's more recent, right? Well, it was Intel at the time, no?
Yeah, I started reverse engineering when I got into jailbreaking. So my entire experience pretty much with reverse engineering has been ARM64.
So on phones, basically.
On phones,
yeah. What about you? Because you said you were doing more software, so you were not really working with ARM at the time, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I reversed a little bit of iOS stuff, but I think I did not really I had been reversing Intel, and then I think until I got an M1 Mac when those came out, was I think kind of around the same time that I got more serious about iOS stuff as well. And then especially since all the software on my computer that I was trying to crack was also compiled for ARM, I had to learn that pretty quickly. But I would say that I actually kind of learned it the opposite way of what Ben did, but in a very similar strategy, which is I think it's not really a controversial or unknown thing that being good at just regular software engineering is definitely a huge perk when reverse engineering, because if you have no idea how software is typically written, then your ability to infer what's going on is way more limited. So I would actually, when I was first starting out, go to godbolt.org, which is the compiler explorer thing, and I would just write really tiny programs and see how they turn into assembly, and then at different optimization levels too, to kind of understand how does the data and everything else move around. And then you kind of learn to when you look at the assembly, you can kind of recognize what common patterns structure accesses and function calls and all of that start to look like. So
what was your motivation for doing that? Because that sounds really boring.
Yeah, no, I mean,
to be honest.
the motivation was being, shit at reversing and wanting to get better. Because it was like, I think, obviously, I'm not old enough to have been reversing back like pre-hex raise decompiler. Like I guess even the earliest copy of IDA I had, which was 6.0 or something, had the decompiler with it. So that's a huge privilege, of course, being able to have that and grow up using that. But I think there were times where the decompiler would get stuck, and then I felt like I was at you feel like kind of a fraud, or like you don't actually understand what's going on the moment that the decompiler breaks, and you're like, oh, I don't know how to reverse anymore. So
I still feel like that today.
Yeah, no, same. But like it's but getting better at understanding stuff just by looking at assembly, and then also like obviously decompilers are imprecise tools, and as nowadays more than ever with weird compiler optimizations in modern languages and stuff, you being able to look at the assembly, like sometimes if you look at the decompiler and something looks not quite right and you think that something weird is going on, you can just cross-reference to the assembly and usually get a hint of, oh, the decompiler guessed the incorrect number of arguments for this function, or maybe it guessed the argument types wrong, and then you can fix that and everything cleans up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So different than what like Ben did.
I did what he did in reverse. He started just cross-referencing the IDA, like the pseudocode lines to the assembly, and then I guess was writing programs to see how they turned into assembly.
Yeah.
But we developed the same understanding.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting difference though, because I feel like the way I learned ARM64 was kind of by accident, or like, it's something I picked up along the way, because the motivation was I want to write jailbreaks, so I need to read the kernel code and figure out how to patch it and bypass stuff. And, as a byproduct of that, I learned ARM64 assembly, rather than sitting down and saying, okay, I want to learn ARM64 assembly, let's write some C code and compile it.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it was usually like targeted to something that I was reversing, and I saw something in IDA that I didn't quite understand, and then I look at the disassembly and be like, I don't really know what's going on here, and I don't think the decompiler does either. So I need to take a moment to regroup, and I try to like write some similar code. That's also super handy for like compiler optimization stuff, and I'm of course failing to think of a good example now, but like it's a good way to see how the compiler might actually, I guess, adjust your code before it becomes assembly, and that can sometimes help you recognize, when somebody else's code has had that done to it.
A loop unrolling is one that comes to mind.
Loop unrolling on Intel, I guess I don't see this on ARM as much, but on Intel you get a lot of these weird like optimized division things where it turns out that like for all 32-bit numbers there's some identity where if you divide by 7, that's actually the same as like left shifting some number of times and then modulo and then subtract and something like some crazy equivalency.
Is that what loop unrolling is?
No, loop.
No, separate thing.
Yeah, loop unrolling is like if you have a loop that might run for a fixed number of iterations, so maybe only 3 times, and it's something simple where the compiler says, you know what, like instead of inserting branches to repeatedly run this same block of code, we'll just actually write it out 3 times because it's a constant fixed number of iterations. And
so if you had, like both of you, if you had to learn reverse engineering today, would you do it any differently? Would you do trainings? Do you think that there's better content out there that you would want to look up now?
For me, I don't think so. I think I'd go with the same approach. And the reason why is because I don't think I can motivate myself to sit down and learn like the ARM64 instruction set architecture. But the way I did it, like I said, was, my motivation was writing a jailbreak. And as a byproduct, I learned it because I had to, pick that skill up along the way. So I don't think I'd do anything differently. Maybe a training is a good resource if you kind of want to get up to speed quickly.
You've never done any trainings?
Nothing, no. Everything I've learned through my career has been either from friends from blog posts or projects I've worked on myself.
Okay. Oh, what about you? Would you do it differently?
Probably not. I mean, I think similarly, like, I think it's one of the difficult things when learning this kind of stuff is obviously at a pure level. I think that the content can be kind of dry if you remove some sort of end goal from it. So, like, for me, like CTF never really motivated me because you spend some couple hours working on a challenge and then the CTF's over in another 12 hours and you have kind of nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
But I should clarify too that I am not a advocate of software piracy. But before I endorse this again, when I was learning reversing so that I could crack stuff, obviously the reward at the end was like that you actually get to use the software.
Yeah.
So like there's a very tangible, and I think this comes the same with jailbreaking. There's a very tangible result of your hard work, and that kind of keeps you focused. I think that if you just sat down and said, "Oh, I'm going to learn about ARM assembly," I mean, obviously, I think it's cool, but I think if you were to like show somebody new that it
I mean, I think it's cool now.
Yeah,
But 7 years ago, I wouldn't have said the same thing.
I would actually probably. I think that trainings or courses or anything like that is only so helpful because ultimately, I think the only thing that actually helps you get good at this kind of stuff is just, banging your head against the wall for some magical number of hours, and then eventually it clicks. But I don't think that reversing or security stuff is really something that can be just taught to you in like a textbook fashion. There's a certain amount of application required for you to really like develop that mental model of being able to do it independently. And
it's a hands-on thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And if I was like coaching somebody to do it now, I'd actually probably tell them not to use the decompiler for like the first couple weeks, just to get a better mental model of how like the computer actually works.
Like focus on the instructions, like the assembly?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously more like you wouldn't reverse an iOS kernel that way because that's way too much code to go instruction by instruction. But I think that ultimately the decompiler is still, at the end of the day, like a tool to help you obtain an understanding more quickly. But the instructions are the only objective truth as to what's actually being executed. And I mean, you could have bugs that are really subtle. I mean, they would probably appear in the decompiler, but I think having an understanding of how data passes through registers onto the stack into structure, like it would be like trying to go compete in a sport and never practicing. I think that you're missing something if you don't at least have an understanding of how that works.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. But so if you were to give me like any tips on how I could learn VR, would you recommend that I then focus on like a specific project with a reward that would motivate me to reverse?
Find something that really, really motivates you, and where like reverse engineering and VR is a kind of skill that's required to do that to some degree. So maybe that's like you want to go and compete in some CTF, or just you set the goal of doing a bunch of CTF challenges in 2025. Or maybe it's I want to, write a jailbreak or understand this exploit I found that I think is really cool. Or, there could be any number of things, but I think the number one key, as with kind of anything in life, is motivation. You just find something that motivates you and the rest will kind of come naturally.
How do you guys find motivation in your work these days?
Getting into iOS jailbreaking, I developed very quickly the understanding or the idea that like if you have a kernel PE, that equals a jailbreak.
A what?
A kernel PE, like a kernel exploit.
PE stands for
privilege escalation.
Oh.
Yeah.
I should know that.
So yeah, if you have a kernel exploit on iOS, then at the time at least that equaled a jailbreak on the latest version or that version. So I very quickly developed this idea that if I can find my own kernel PEs or always maintain this kernel PE capability, then I can in theory always have my own private 0-day jailbreak that works on the latest version and the latest phone. And that has always been a really exciting idea for me. And definitely when I started, that was the goal. Like, it was I want to find a bug that I can turn into a P and write my own jailbreak. And I think, after a few years, I achieved that goal. And then it became, I was approached by a friend and they said, oh, by the way, there's a market for this stuff. You know, you can do this as a job. It's what I've been doing for a few years. They had also previously come out of the jailbreaking scene. So I think to this day, there is still the idea of kernel P equals a jailbreak. And in theory, that really excites me. In practice, it's not something that I've actually done, 5 years now. I haven't written a jailbreak in many years. But that's always been the motivation. And I guess when you add a paycheck to that equation, then it kind of turns everything up to 11, So it's do I do something that I like the kind of the theoretical capability it grants you, but also I'm getting paid to do it. That's such a win-win.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it, yeah.
Yeah, it started off as a hobby and something I did for fun. So perfect.
But in the work that you do now, do you sometimes sit in front of your computer and be like, oh man, I really don't want to do this? Do you take time off at that point when you feel like, okay, I can't be productive today enough, I'm just going to do something else and come back when I feel like I can get work done? Yeah,
there's definitely times when, John mentioned earlier, it is a really mentally taxing job. There is only so long that you can stare at code for on a screen before your brain is literally fried. Mm-hmm. And I've had days where I've worked long hours, on a project, and I've been as exhausted physically as if I'd just gone to the gym and trained for 2 hours. It can be really, really tiring. So yeah, there are definitely times where, some days I'll just wake up and I'll just have brain fog and I can't really think straight, and I'll just think, you know what, I'm wasting my time here, I'm going to do something else and come back to it.
What do you usually do when you need to relax your brain?
Literally spud out on the sofa and watch TV. And eat a burger or something.
Okay.
Or a decaf coffee or a Diet Coke.
Decaf coffee?
Yeah.
Okay.
I try and avoid caffeine where I can.
Oh, okay. All right. And what about you? How do you find motivation sometimes to work on projects?
I think a lot of I'll mirror what Ben said, which is that obviously this started as a hobby, and then, I think we've both been, I guess, extremely fortunate that it also happens to be quite profitable as a job. I guess even growing up in school, I've always had a hard time motivating for stuff that I wasn't interested in. So it turns out that this one thing that I am deeply interested in is something that you can make a career out of. So I guess I feel very privileged in that regard, because I think that if I was interested in something else, that's probably what I'd be doing. Even if that thing, wasn't a good career, I guess I can only really do stuff that I genuinely find interested in. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to force it. And then, I guess I'm just always been kind of just very interested in computers and naturally curious about how stuff works. So some of the projects that I start are simply out of personal curiosity or desire to understand something better or teach myself something. I think we talked about it a little bit over CCC, but this operating systems development project that I did, which was kind of just for fun, honestly, for the sake of trying to develop a stronger mental model of how ARM virtual memory works. I guess obviously I'd been familiar with that before, but I wanted to have to write all the code to actually set up page tables, turn on the MMU, mm-hmm. do everything by myself, learn what every single bit in that field, in the PTEs means and all their consequences. And honestly, for better or for worse, for me, it's I have to do stuff to really actually understand it. I don't know. I feel like there's other people that can read a page of documentation on something and be like, okay, cool, got it. And I guess for simple stuff, I can be able to do that. But I think that the moment that things get a little more complex, I have to really expose myself to that topic to develop a concrete understanding of it in my head to where I can, operate efficiently. Mm-hmm. So I would say that a lot of projects motivated by that, and then just the general interest in it in general.
Okay. So if you guys weren't working in VR, what would you be doing?
Another good question. I don't know. When I was at school, I mean, I've always been into IT since a really young age, like similar to John. I started programming like from a super young age. I can hardly remember when it even was. It's just something I've always been doing. So when I was at school, kind of about to go to college, my thought process at the time was, well, I'll go to college and I'll study computer science and I'll get a job in software development. I had a family friend who was doing the same thing, and he was like doing really well from it and seemed to enjoy what he did. So I seemed like a good path for me. Thankfully, I ended up, finding this other path around the same time, about 15 or 16, or maybe a little bit later, but around that age. And yeah, 7 years later, here we are. I really don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for what I do now.
Well, you said you like music. Do you think you would have ever made a career in that?
It's a good question, actually, because my parents are both musicians, and my dad has his whole life has made a career out of music, one way or another. So it's something I always grew up with a lot, and it's like a big kind of area of interest of mine. But I've never really considered myself a creative person, or kind of never really been motivated to like make music or.
I feel like
people
you have to
always laugh when I say this.
Well, you have to be really creative to do the work that you guys are doing.
But I find that I'm mentally, I'm not very artistically inclined, but more logically inclined.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, if you gave me a piece of paper and asked me to draw a picture, I'd really struggle to come up with what to draw.
Right. I mean, me too, but I'm creative in a lot of different fields. I would say.
Yeah. It's, people do always laugh when I say that, and I can understand why, because I think, everyone has some degree of creativity, but
yeah. Well, you also give off a lot of creativity because you dress nicely, you do music, you seem quite artistic in that sense. Like, I would think that you would be a creative person, but
yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how you look at it. I think, the way I dress is just kind of, I see clothes I like, I'm like, that looks cool, I'm going to wear that, Whereas making music, you kind of have to come up with all these ideas of like, oh, this sound, and I'm going to put this together in this way, and then, you take it in a certain direction, and it's just, maybe I've not given myself enough of a chance, but it's not something I've ever really been able to wrap my head around.
It's probably something that you can develop as well.
Yeah, and like me and John are going to give it a go together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah?
Soon. Yeah.
I want to visit him in a week or two, and we were joking about, like, I'll show him some music production stuff and teach him how to make some music, so.
Okay, that's nice.
Every time I've tried, it's never gone anywhere.
Oh.
Basically, in conclusion, we're dropping an album next year.
So. Nice, can't wait.
Be on the lookout for our mixtape player.
And so what about you? What would you do if you had to do anything else in VR?
I really don't know. I mean, like, I guess the logical answer would be probably when you say VR, like, if that means that I can do other stuff in computers, then I would probably just do some sort of software engineering. I mean, I think before I really got into security and reverse engineering and stuff like that, I think I was probably destined more for a desktop application development, or hopefully not web development, but something else along that category of just a little more vanilla, regular engineering kind of stuff. And
if everything goes to shit, that's probably what we'll end up doing.
yeah. Once iOS is over.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask. Like, it seems like it's getting harder and harder and harder to find things.
Yeah.
So, how do you cope with that? What are the challenges right now in VR that you are facing on a daily basis?
I mean, in the iOS space, it's mainly that Apple have done a really good job of poaching some smart people.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. They have done that. But it's mainly that Apple's kind of strategy for security, over the last few years, they seem to have started taking it a bit more seriously. And their strategy has been kind of mitigate against everything they possibly can and do as much of that in hardware as well. So, we've seen a lot of security features introduced in the hardware over the last few years, and also they've done a really good job in the software. There were some parts of the kernel, for example, that have historically been kind of joked about being exploit SDKs, because it was like, oh, I have this bug, it gives me this primitive, so I'm just going to use IPCK message and boom, you have an exploit. And a few years ago, they, for a long time, they didn't really seem to care that was the case. They were more interested in patching bugs. And then a few years ago, they've taken a bit of more of a, what's the phrase, like defense in depth stance, where they say, okay, we're going to patch the bugs. We're also going to implement some mitigations that remove a lot of classic tricks that people have been using. We're going to write IPCK message in a much safer, smarter way. We're going to introduce pack and then start styling things. So basically over time they've been killing off a lot of the kind of classic tricks. And I think we're now getting to a point where for the longest time there was always like a generic strategy available. If you had a bug of a certain class, there would be a generic strategy that you could roughly use to develop a PE from that. And I think now we're getting to a point where it's, okay, I have this bug, here's this very specific primitive, and this other very specific thing I have, and this other really specific thing. And if we're really lucky, I describe it as the Swiss cheese effect, where if we're really lucky, we can combine all the slices of Swiss cheese and the holes will match up and we'll get a PE out of the end of it. But, I think you can find 100 bugs now, and a large majority of them will be useless. You do have to, I think there is an element of luck involved these days.
Because now you have to mostly focus on exploit chains, right?
Yeah, the hardest bit is exploitation and exploit primitive rather than bug.
I think a good way to kind of simplify for people who aren't as familiar with iOS is there was a long time, and this was honestly before I was really much into iOS security. This is maybe the iOS 7, 8, 9 days, but there was a long time where someone would find a bug and then exploit it publicly, and that bug gets patched.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's more like somebody will find a bug, exploit that publicly. Maybe somebody will do that again, different similar bug, and then that entire category of bugs gets like fundamentally patched with some different mitigation or change that they introduce. Yeah. And I think I guess you could interpret it as like it was a very lazy, if I can say lazy, a way of handling it before. It was just fix the problems as they come up. And now it seems like there's a bit more proactive effort to fix problem classes and make it less likely that similar problems will ever be exist again or be exploitable again, as opposed to just fixing the one specific thing that was found.
Yeah.
And similarly, like back then, it was like, if you had a chain of a couple bugs and something got patched, it was just like, okay, cool, we'll find another just like that. But obviously now with that, it's a lot more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if at some point, Apple's always been really hard on performance. And I don't know if at some point there was a shift from, okay, we're just going to go straight for performance to, okay, maybe we need to consider security a bit more. Because there's generally performance trade-offs you need to make for security and vice versa. You could just think like a silly example is the length of the password on your phone. The longer it is, the more secure. But then there's a performance, so to speak, trade-off where it takes longer to enter your passcode.
Mm-hmm. And it's not very user-friendly for people who want just the PIN code.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard rumors too that with the WebKit team at Apple, which is the browser engine for iOS, Safari, all that, that their internal, I guess, threshold for new features. It's like they introduce some sort of new change or security feature or something, and it has even a 1 or 2% performance impact that's like a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, and understandably so. I mean, obviously, a browser engine is something that you do want to be genuinely very fast, but yeah, there does seem to still be, from what I've heard, some very high emphasis on performance, and that there probably have been clever ideas that have come up about how to make stuff more secure that just were too slow and rejected.
Wow. Okay, so they really focus on like usability, performance, and they kind of make a trade-off then, I guess, on like security and performance.
Yeah, there's always a balance. There are, academically speaking, a lot of security features that could be implemented if performance was not as much of a consideration. And I don't know for a fact, but I think like memory encryption on the set is one example of this, where they couldn't use it everywhere because it's less performant, but it's more secure. And in that specific case, the trade-off is worth it. I don't know for a fact if that's true, but yeah, there are a lot of features that you could use. Firebloom actually is a perfect example. So in the boot chain, they have this compiler add-on called Firebloom, which say you have you have some code accessing some memory, and it's meant to only access these 8 bytes, for example. Well, if an attacker had control, they might be able to change the offset so it access some different memory, and then you got some memory corruption. So they'd have a compiler feature which emits extra checks around every memory access, where it's like, okay, we know this memory access must just fall into these 8 bytes. So if for some reason it doesn't, we're just going to panic.
Okay.
And that's like a big improvement to security and the memory model, but it has a huge performance. What's the word?
Issue?
Impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have like one last question before we can kind of close, because from what I know, you guys both work remotely, and that then means that you don't really have an office to go to work. So how do you find the, not specifically motivation, but the mindset to get into like a work mode? Because I know, like, for me, it's really difficult sometimes to work from home, because I just really get distracted easily, and I have issues focusing, so I like to go to the office sometimes just to be like work mode. But you guys can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to find out too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, I think I enjoy socializing a lot. I enjoy being in an office with people where you kind of have the regular banter and just shenanigans that kind of keeps your day a little bit lighter and moving along. I think that a 10 or 11-hour day in the office actually feels shorter than an 8-hour day working from home alone. And yeah, motivation can be tricky sometimes, where I think that, if you're working on, if you have like only one task on your plate and you're at a part where you're stuck or you're not making as much progress as you would like, or you're feeling like you're kind of at the limit of your mental capacity, yeah, it can get kind of demoralizing, and waking up in the morning and thinking, okay, I have to work on this for another 8 hours today. And, you do that for 5 days a week and, still don't really make a lot of progress. Like, that can obviously be tough. But then conversely, you have days where stuff is going your way, and it's almost like, playing a video game that you want to get to the end to, or something you like want to keep working until you can get something to work, where like that you're close to the finish line. But yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think my brain has been cooked by like Instagram Reels and other stuff, where like I'm at a point where it's like, yeah, I think working from home is very easy to get distracted. And the moment something gets difficult, be like, all right, I'm gonna go get up and make some lunch or something and step away. And it is a challenge that I'm still trying to get better at, I suppose.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I must be the odd one out here because I love working from home. It's great. I get up in the morning, I jump on the PC, I have some projects to work on. I don't really struggle for motivation. I don't know if that's just because I really enjoy what I do, or maybe because my position in my team means that I'm sort of a manager, and I have a lot of people reaching out to me about the projects that they're working on. So I always have the option of, okay, things aren't going so well on this project I'm working on, maybe I'll help someone else with something they're looking at, or kind of, just take a call with someone and discuss this in the project. And as John said, yeah, if I'm having a crap day, or I feel really demotivated, or I'm not getting much done, I find it really easy to just step away, make some lunch, watch some Instagram Reels,
Cook your brain.
Yeah. And I think I just enjoy kind of I wouldn't describe myself as like an introverted person, but I do enjoy my own space. I enjoy being able to listen to my music and being in the comfort of my home, and kind of, I enjoy being able to choose the distractions, if that makes sense. You know, I've never worked in an office, so I don't know exactly how. Yeah, lucky. I don't know how it is really, but I can imagine there might be some times where people or things distract you, and you know, when I'm at home, I can lock in, and then if I want to do something else, I have that choice to do something else.
I think working in an office makes it easier to behave. It's easy to get distracted, yeah. And like, but if I was sitting in an office, I wouldn't want to be sitting there, you know, scrolling on my phone, because that's embarrassing if somebody comes by and you're just not doing any work. And then another thing I would say on that regard is, like, obviously, you can't get distracted in an office if you're the person distracting other people. So I think really that's what you should try to aspire for. You know.
That's quite funny. But so you said you never worked in an office, but you also didn't go to uni, I recall, right?
No.
So you're never really working in an environment where you had a lot of people around you.
No, I mean, I finished like secondary school, which is kind of, you finish at 16. I did 1 year of college, but I went to quite a small college. My classes were, 5 to 10 people each. So no, I've never really been in like a busy working environment. The only exception is sometimes the company will do meetups with maybe 15 people from the team to work together in person. But I don't really consider that in the kind of same way as like day job at an office. It's more of like a hangout and a meeting.
Seeing your friends.
Yeah, it's more informal.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think I asked like most of my questions. Do you guys have any like last things that you want to say? Maybe like a motivational quote or just something silly.
A motivational quote.
Or anything. You could just say bada bim, bada boom, we're done.
John's going to pull up his quote.
I have a whole list of them.
Okay, yeah, you can read one or two.
Oh, I don't think I can read it from history.
Go for it.
There's a good one about wind in there.
Oh, yeah, Ben had some thoughts on wind. If I were king of the world or God or something, I would ban wind. Fuck the environment.
100% agree.
What's with your hate for wind?
It's you go outside and it's a beautiful sunny day. Maybe you go to the beach, you're enjoying an ice cream, watching the waves. What's the one thing that will ruin your day? Wind. All of a sudden, that lovely heat on your face from the sun is gone.
I feel like people who fly kites would disagree.
I don't think they're relevant.
Not in my world. Okay, well, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Let's just like do a bye, like a. Thanks for listening. I don't know.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for talking. It was really interesting to have this conversation, and I hope that people will maybe get something out of it.
I hope so.
One thing that you can get out of it is that you don't need to go to university or college to be able to make a lot of cash and buy 5 cars.
True.
That's the end quote. All right. Bye.